Greetings. In this Freedom Whence, John Wesley Bready, on page 145, Bready has been discussing Wesley's attack upon slavery and how on his own deathbed he passed on the torch, which led finally to abolition of the slave trade and indeed slavery itself in the British Empire. He passed on that torch on his deathbed to William Wilberforce and his colleagues. Now, John Wesley's views on war. This section is entitled The Reproach of War. Save for the protests of a handful of Quakers crying in the wilderness, the arbitrament of the sword in Wesley's day was everywhere accepted as the final court of appeal in international disputes. The great evangelist could never be described as a pacifist, yet war he believed to be the sorriest curse men knew, the denial of the higher attributes of civilization, rebellion against humanity and God. War, says Wesley, is a horrid reproach to the Christian name, yea, to the name of man, to all reason and humanity. In all the judgments of God, he avers, the inhabitants of the earth learn righteousness. Famine, plague, earthquake, the people see the hand of God. But when war breaks out, God is forgotten. So long as this monster stalks uncontrolled, where is reason, virtue, humanity? They are utterly excluded. End of quote. In 1758, the 7 Years' War being then at full tide, with France and Austria fighting England and Prussia, and with Central Europe, Canada and India a far-flung battle line, the Wesleys published Hymns of Intercession for All Mankind, and the tenor of their teaching the following couplets reflect. Our earth we now lament to see, with floods of wickedness overflowed, where men like fiends each other tear in all the hellish rage of war. Father of everlasting love, to every soul thy Son reveal, and bid the fallen race arise and turn our earth to paradise. As the trouble with the American colonies began to brew, Wesley wrote to Rankin and other of his preachers in America, imploring them to use their influence for peace. In March 1775, he wrote to Brother Charles, saying, I am of neither side, and yet of both, on the side of New England and of old. We love all and pray for all with a sincere and impartial love. And he besought Charles to be like-minded. A few weeks later, Wesley penned his famous warning to Lord North, the Premier. Quote, in spite of my long-rooted prejudice, I cannot avoid thinking, if I think at all, that an oppressed people ask for nothing more than their legal rights, and that in the most modest and inoffensive manner that the nature of the thing would allow. But waiving all considerations of right and wrong, I ask, is it common sense to use force toward the Americans? These men will not be frightened, and it seems they will not be conquered as easily as was first imagined. They will probably dispute every inch of ground, and if they die sword in hand. End of quote. Lord Dartmouth, colonial secretary, was a friend of Wesley and a convert to the revival. In Wesley's letter to him of June 14, 1775, he pleaded strongly for conciliatory efforts, nor did he shrink from the use of utilitarian as well as spiritual arguments. The Americans, he insisted, believed they were fighting for their homes, not for pay. France and other European nations, he predicted, would enter the struggle and extend the field of carnage. Whereas the Americans were largely united, many Britons, he warned, were ripe for rebellion at home. In conclusion came Wesley's memorable prophetic plea, quote, for God's sake, for the sake of the king, of the nation, of your lovely family, remember Rehoboam, remember Philip II, remember Charles I. End of quote. In the light of later events, were ever admonitions more apt? The following year, when the Revolutionary War was at its height, Wesley wrote his seasonable address to the more serious part of the inhabitants of Great Britain respecting the unhappy contest between us and our American brethren. That's the title. That treatise portrays vividly Wesley's abhorrence of war. Picturing the armies of the Revolution rushing together in conflict, he asks, but what are they going to do? To shoot each other through the head or heart, to stab and butcher each other, Why so? What harm have they done to each other? Why none at all? Most of them are entire strangers to each other. But a matter is in dispute relative to the mode of taxation, so these countrymen, children of the same parents, are to murder each other with all possible haste, to prove who is in the right. What an argument is this! What a method of proof! What an amazing way of deciding controversies. End of quote. Then, suggesting arbitration instead of bloodshed, he inquires, "Are there no wise men among us, none that are able to judge between brethren? But brother goeth to war against brother, and that in the very sight of the heathen? Surely this is a sore evil among us. How is wisdom perished from the wise? What a flood of folly and madness has broke in upon us." Next, more on the American Revolution.